Hello and welcome to the Mobile Accessible Games interview series. I'm your host, Aaron Spelker. Mobile Accessible Games is a group that's dedicated to all things about mobile accessible gaming. And through our interview series, we interview game developers, accessibility influencers, and accessibility advocates. And this week, we are interviewing a game developer. His name is Miguel Esteban, and he is the developer of the game series Hero or Villain. There's two games in the series right now, Genesis and Battle Royale. And he's going to tell us all about his games and his path learning about gaming accessibility. So, Miguel, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So, Miguel, I always like to just start off the interview series, just turning it over to you for a brief little bit to just, give a little bit background, a little bio about yourself in a few sentences, who you are and what you're about.
So, okay, thanks. Well, my background, I guess, originally, I'm not actually a game developer. I'm more of an academic. And so I do research on various things. And I'm half English, half Spanish. I lived most of my adult life in England and, well, nowadays in Japan. So I've been in Japan for 19 years. And yeah, that's about it. Yeah.
And it's an interesting, being Spanish, living in London, now living 19 years in Japan. Like, how did that path? Were you born in Spain or were you born in England? And
I was born in England. I lived in Spain as a kid, but then my mother's English, so eventually we moved back to England, and then so I went to high school in England, and
and then schooling, you said, brought you to Japan, right?
Well, I mean, I worked after I got a degree in engineering. I worked for a few years in the UK, in Switzerland, and then eventually I got, a bit restless, I guess. So I decided to study a PhD, and that's what brought me to Japan. So I did my PhD in Japan, and after that, I've just continued here.
Was it easy, like after you got your PhD, was it easy to stay in Japan, or do they make that process easy, or is it difficult, or what's the?
It's not that difficult. I mean, especially compared to stories that you hear in the United States about people struggling to get green cards or whatnot. Actually, it's relatively straightforward to stay in Japan. I would say it's relatively straightforward, especially if you're coming from an academic background. It isn't too difficult to stay here.
And like the firm that you work for, is that an English based firm, or is it a Japanese based? Like do you do your work, talking to your coworkers in Japanese or English, or how do you do that?
I lecture at university. So actually I lecture in an international program. So I teach civil engineering in English.
Okay.
So I do speak Japanese to some extent. Enough to go to the bank and try to get a mortgage, but I struggle reading a newspaper. That might sound a bit counterintuitive, but I mean, essentially, I can get by.
Gotcha. So we're talking to you today about your game series. It's called Hero or Villain, and two games in that franchise, Genesis and Battle Royale. And again, just at the top here, why don't you just tell people a little bit about that, franchise and those games and what they're about, so people can understand what we're going to be talking about this session.
So I guess these games are superhero games. The idea is to let the reader experience as much as being a superhero as you can. I always think of my games as more like sandboxes as much as possible. I don't like to tell people too much how they should go through the game. I try to give a lot of paths through games. What is it that, how would I put it? As a kid, I used to play this RPG, this tabletop RPG called Marvel Superheroes.
Mm-hmm.
And then at some point, I had done some other game. I had written some other games for hosted games, choice of games, hosted games for the company. And at one point, I just came across these old books, and I thought, this was a great system to make something. And then I just started writing something, not really thinking too much about what I was doing. There was a competition at the time. Somebody in the Choice of Game forums had decided to make a competition about writing a game in 1 month. So I just thought, I'll get to it and, make a small thing just for this competition. And then I think I got something like second or third prize from it. So I thought, oh, right, okay, there's something in here maybe. And then it just expanded from there.
Was that like the bare bones of Hero or Villain Genesis without what you created for this contest?
Yeah, that was maybe a tenth of what is there at the moment. So in terms of the playthrough, I think it was maybe it was about 10,000 word playthrough.
Okay.
And currently it's about 35 or 40, depending on which path you take. So it's about one fourth of the total length of the game, if you want. But in terms of what do you call it? In terms of the actual size of the game, the game grew laterally as well.
Right.
Not just in length, but sort of I expanded the number of side missions. I expanded different things you can do. And
how long did that expansion, that add-on after the contest, how long did it take you to kind of bring it from the 10,000 words, up to where it is today?
I think it was about a 10,000 word playthrough, but it was about 40,000 words in total. The one that went into the competition around there.
Okay.
And I think at the moment it's about, Choice of Games says it was 340, but I think it's grown now to about 370 or 80. And it took me about a year, I think, about a year maybe, let's say, or just over a year to go from the competition to the final release version. And then I kept adding after that. So, and I kept on even adding more stuff now that isn't in the game yet. So when somebody tells me sometimes like, what about this? Then, okay, well, that sounds like a good idea. And I sometimes tweak around, add a few thousand words here or there.
So, writing a story, relatively easy. You just, have an idea and you start writing it down, but converting that story into a playable game with branching narratives and side quests, what is your background that you were able to do that aspect of it, kind of like the quote unquote coding part of creating this game?
Well, the coding part, I mean, I guess I've done a lot of coding during my PhD. I program a lot in Fortran. So, I mean, the language used for this is ChoiceScript, which is actually very easy compared to other programming language, if you want. And this idea of branching narratives, I guess a lot of it, I put it down to my background as a dungeon master, like playing D&D when I was younger. Just always sort of this idea of writing stories for friends and letting people go wherever they wanted to go. And nowadays, I think one of the big things in my games of how they expand laterally is just the players. Players keep saying, or the playtesters say, how about this? I would like to actually do this. And it's like, well, okay, if you want to do that, then I'll add an option for you to do that. So often, I think that my games are only as good as my playtesters, if that makes sense.
Sure. Yeah.
So, I mean, I remember the first
kind of
game I wrote.
crowdsourcing ideas.
Yep. It's exactly that. So in the first game I ever wrote, somebody wrote me, there was one person, one of the playtesters, and she wrote me a very nice and yet angry email where she said that certain characters, she said like, no, that's completely wrong. I just want to fireball this guy. I don't care. So that just created an entire new pathway or narrative through the game of like, well, if you want to actually just attack this person, then it wasn't how I envisaged the story, but well, fine. I'll let you do that and see where that takes the story.
Yeah, explore that. That's interesting. For those who might not understand, I mean, we talk about, coding and things like that. Maybe have a little bit of a technical explanation, but also as simply as you can explain it, like, how do you code, well, I've made this choice, now that brings me down this path, or I've made this selection and now, a particular stat that you're tracking is now higher than it used to be. Like, how do you in ChoiceScript kind of write that? Like, what is the coding string that one creates to start kind of tracking these things and moving the game forward? If you can kind of, as best you can and as simply as you can, kind of explain what does it take to actually code a game like this.
So CodeScript doesn't actually have as much like when you see some other code like in, I don't know, C++ or Fortran, it has a lot of mathematical symbology if you want. CodeScript is quite simple in a sense. You write some text and at the end of the test, you put some asterisk, and you put the word choice. And
Okay.
under this choice, there will be hashtags. So each hashtag is one of the options that you have.
Okay. And then when you import that into choice script, it's putting that down. Those hashtags become the buttons that you would press to.
Yes.
Okay.
And then under each of these hashtags, so let's say I say, right, you are in a cave. Would you like to go left or right?
Mhm.
So then I write in choice script choice, and then I would write hashtag left, hashtag right.
Mhm.
In hashtag left, I would say go to left cave, and then I would start to write another paragraph on the left cave and again on the right cave. Of course, choice script is often done. It's a language that is mostly geared towards railroading stories.
Mhm.
So normally in a lot of choice script, what you have are not true choices, but fake choices.
Right.
So no matter what you say, the story will continue in more or less the same way.
Right. Or eventually
Right.
we'll get to that. Yeah. It's, I always kind of explain it's not really open world. It's kind of, you're on a track basically moving
Yep.
in the, from one city to the next city, and you will always end up at the end at that next city. You can
Yes.
divert a little bit from it, but you're not going to not get there.
So those are the fake choices, right? But there are the true choices also. And the true choices are the ones that take you to different cities. Right?
Right.
But the more true choices that you make, the more the story is branching and the more complicated it is to write.
Right.
Essentially, if you have a game where, as you said, you're railroaded into one story, then if you're going from New York to Boston, then you will always get in that story from New York to Boston. If halfway through you're actually given a true choice to go to
Philadelphia,
then at that point you're writing two different stories. So your job as a writer then doubles.
Right.
So each true choice that you give people is increasing the amount of work that you have to do.
Yeah. How did you keep track of, particularly when you started branching out, and keeping this analogy going, all right, well, I have one story that goes from New York to Boston. Now I have one that goes from New York to Philadelphia. I have one that goes from New York to Chicago. And then from Chicago, you could go to Dallas. And now it's starting to really branch all over the place and different paths that people can take to get to different locations. How did you just keep track of, I didn't, create a dead end here. I told people they could go to Philly, but I never really kind of wrote that they could move on to Chicago.
So this is when the headaches start, right? When you start to create a more complex story, then you have to keep track of many things. I have in Hero Villain in Genesis, in the original game, which is probably the most complex of the game so far because they're oldest, and then I've added more to it. I try to set up stories that are branching, this what I call side quests. So things that you can do which don't really alter the main body of the story, if you want. So you're still kind of railroaded, but you're doing things to the side. And I try to put these in parallel so that if you are interested in following a certain side story, then you can follow it as you're following the main story if you want. I find that this is a lot easier than creating and then at a certain point in the game, then I just do create entire new branches, which just allow the player to go and do something completely different. And some of these branches, though, then rejoin other branches. But yeah, this starts to get very complicated, and this is when it becomes easy to make coding mistakes. And this is when the playtesters come in, and I mean, yeah, they're worth their weight in gold, and they start to highlight inconsistencies. And
yeah, the thing I like to do about your side quests is, if you follow certain side quests, like in this playthrough, I decided to do side quest A. You might get to that bigger choice, which doing that side quest now opens up an option that wasn't available if I hadn't done that particular side quest.
yes.
The next playthrough I do side quest B. Well, now that thing that opened up when I did side quest A is actually not there. It's now whatever B might have opened up for me or made possible for me. So that kind of helps make these side quests not as railroad as possible, but open up a different ending branch or a different direction you can go at that bigger choice, which I thought was a good way to do it.
Yeah, I try to do that as well, because otherwise, when some players, for example, and there's a lot of it again come from playtesting, when somebody says, well, actually, I would like to do this side quest, and then this person, then you have to follow this side quest to its logical conclusion sometimes, right? And this starts to happen. And I think this is in Battle Royale, this happens a lot, that the story is actually driven, the outcomes at the end are driven by the side quests that the player is doing. And it's kind of easy to miss. Maybe I should have sometimes made it clearer, because sometimes people are asking me, well, actually, how can I do that? And it's, well, yeah, the only way to do that is if you interact with a certain person, and for that you have to do different things.
So along those lines, particularly even maybe more so in Battle Royale, like, how do you track things like, the relationship building that you're doing with somebody? Like, so somebody doesn't like you at the beginning, you got to get them up to the point where they like you, which then maybe opens a choice or has them assist you in something that you're looking to do. How do you, and again, in kind of that coding language, how do you track that some decision has increased, a relationship? What is the hashtag or parentheses or whatever that you do to do that?
Each character that is in the game has relationship stat. So let's say there's a character called, I don't know, the police captain. So the police captain will have a variable called relationship police captain. So every time, if you have a choice to talk to the police captain and you say, I hate you, then the code will say asterisk set relationship police captain minus 20%. So, and this essentially, the actions that you do in the game, what you say to the characters, or the actions that you do, if seen by other characters, will influence their opinion of you. And then sometimes, of course, it's easy. The police captain is happy if you are arresting criminals or whatnot. Other characters sometimes can be a bit more complicated in the sense that maybe their ideas of what they want you to do is not necessarily that simple. I mean, some characters might not be happy if you try to be nice to them or like something like that. They might be happier if you're a bit more firm, or I don't know. This is to do with the interpretation of who the characters are and what they want in, what they like in other people, kind of thing.
So for that, so for creating that, relationship police captain variable, if you will, is there any, do you put like a $ in front of that to let the computer know that this is a variable that, I'm going to be tracking?
Yeah. It's an asterisk. So
it's an asterisk again.
Yeah, it's an asterisk. It's asterisks, the word set, and then the name of the variable. In this case, it would be relationship police captain. Percentage plus or minus 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, depending on how big is it that, how big does that action, how big is the weight of that action? If you just kill somebody, then the police captain will maybe minus 60% or something in that, because obviously this is a big thing.
Well, that's another thing that you got to kind of keep track, because if you're saying, well, I'm going to make something that when the police captain is, at 80% relationship, it opens up a branch, but you got to make sure that someone can actually get to 80%. That your choices, of doing various things for him don't add up to 75, and you can actually never unlock that choice because you haven't had the pieces add up to, the threshold that you have set to have something.
Yeah. So this is where I sometimes fail in my games, because I create systems. I like creating systems. And sometimes I've been amazed that people have told me things that I thought you wouldn't be able to do in the game because you wouldn't have enough whatever statistic. People have told me, no, actually you can. It is possible. If I go through the game in this way, I can actually achieve this stat. Likewise, sometimes people have told me, no, it's literally impossible. You cannot actually do that. So again, but the beauty of having a digital game is every time somebody gives you feedback, you just add to the game, you modify it. And I keep on thinking of my games as sandboxes. So it's not, and I create a world, and then even if I don't think something might be possible, I still put an option to be able to do it. Like if I say, right, it's going to be impossible for somebody at this point in the game to be able to jump here because he probably cannot have an agility of 95.
Right.
Some people tell me, no, I can. I can even do it in the hardest mode of the game. And I've scratched my head sometimes thinking, well, how? And the person describes it to me, and it's, yeah, okay, yeah, that is true. I never thought that was possible. But I think I prefer to create sandboxes and let people do things rather than thinking what is it that they really can or cannot do. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Just going back to the coding, did you say when you're creating a choice, which then has the hashtags that are the actual choices, did you say it's double asterisk and then you write the word choice? Is it two?
No,
it's
one asterisk. It's one asterisk and then choice.
One asterisk and choice. So, and then one asterisk set, and then the name of the variable to set the variable. So it sounds like, while there's a language, if you will, it's not terribly complex. Well, let's say there's a choice, right? So, okay, choice, go left, but you can only go left if you have an agility of over 50. How do you write that so that the left choice only becomes available under?
Okay, so let's do a slightly more complicated example, right? So let's say, you're at the cave. You can go left, you can go straight, or you can climb side of the cave to get to something which is, I don't know, like an opening which is on like a second level. So I would have, will you go left, right, or try to climb? Asterisk, choice. Hashtag, go left. Okay. Asterisk, go right. Then asterisk, not a hashtag in this case, asterisk, if agility is greater than 70, hashtag climb to the second level.
Okay. And so that'll, when you're looking at the game, and you've written it that way, does climb to the second level, if you don't meet the 70, is it just not there, or is it dimmed?
It's, if you just write if you write if, it will not be there.
Okay.
If you don't have a higher agility. You can also say selectable underscore if. And selectable underscore if will show even if your agility is not high enough.
Gotcha. So it'll just be there, climb to second level, dim, say dimmed in the case of voiceover. So when you were writing all of this, do you write it right into a choice script program, or are you writing this like in Word and then you upload it to choice script? How do you,
This
where do you
depends on
actually
my mood. So I sometimes write in a Word document the main text if you want, story, and then I put it into Word script. Sometimes I'm just writing it directly into choice script. It just depends on my mood. This is not. I heard also many people say the same thing. Some people have a real system that they follow all the time. There are times when I want to code. There are times when I don't want to code. If I don't want to code, then I'm better off just writing in a Word document a long story. If I want to, it just depends. I find that for writing the core story, I'm better off just with a Word document. And for writing, for doing the branches, I'm better off or branches or like side things, I'm better off just doing it in choice script directly.
So another technical question. So you can go, check your stats and see, where you are on relationships and things like that. How do you make those things show up under some tab that says, stats?
Yeah. So this is already, a lot of this already exists in choice script. So this is what Choice of Games already provides, is this environment. So that tab exists without doing anything.
Okay.
So that's why all these games, all these Choice of Games like hosted games or the Choice of Games brand, they all have very similar layout, right? They all have like the stats. They all have like all that is set up. So those tabs exist already from the minute you download the packages. Now, you have to tell. So in the stats there is a file, text file, that will always exist, that this stats file. And in this stats file, you have to define exactly what it is that that you want to appear, which variables you want to appear.
So do you just write like relationship police captain, and then that's all you have to do, or do you have to do show relationship police captain? Like, what's the coding words you use to have it show up on that page?
Right. So you can literally just say the easiest way. So you just open that and you write asterisk stat chart, and then so asterisk stat underscore chart is the actual command, and then you write, for example, text underneath it. You write tab, so there's one tab or one space underneath it, and you say text relationship underscore whatever the variable is called, and then you show what it is that's going to show. So in this case, police captain, something like that. So it's fairly simple, actually. Then you can, of course, start to do more interesting and intelligent things where you show some things or you don't show some things, depending on what you want to do. But at the easiest level, it's quite easy to just make this table.
That's where you would add in, like the if statements, right, to show or not show something.
If you haven't met the character yet, and you want to put another variable showing when it is that you meet the character for the first time.
Right. All right. Does ChoiceScript, I'm sure they have directions of, what are all these various commands, but do they give you like, here is a already kind of structured template that you could then just kind of tweak to fit your needs? Do they have like template packages that people can use?
Yes, you download it and it's all there. If you want, I think I cannot, it's been a long time since I downloaded it, but I think it even already has the first commands there. So you could start writing and then just get to the first command and then just alter it by yourself. And it is fairly simple. As a programming language goes, it's really simple. Once, I think it's biggest thing that people have is this initial, it's programming.
Right.
But once you start doing it, actually, it's not that hard at all, I would say.
And, maybe could you also explain to people who may not know, there's kind of two things, like, there's ChoiceScript and, hosted games or something like that, or the two different models, if you will, under this kind of text adventure choice games. And maybe you could explain to people the difference between those two.
So there's choice of games, and then there is hosted games. So both are the same company, actually.
Right.
So choice of games is how the company started. They started making these games, and then they developed. So it was a couple of friends or three friends. Anyway, Dan, Jason, what's the name of the other guy? Anyway, they started to develop these games for the iPhone. I think the first one was Choice of the Dragon. And to do that, they developed this language, okay? And then they did, I think, Choice of Broadsides. They did all the games. And at one point, I think it was that, so they started to develop their own formula of how games should be in their opinion. You should have choices, the choices should be balanced, certain ideas that they had about how games should be. But at one point, they decided, well, actually, who are we to tell how the story should be? I mean, if you want to make a story in a different way, and this is how they started hosted games. So they're essentially hosting other people's games, but they want to differentiate themselves because they say, well, actually, some of the hosted games can be nice, but some of them don't follow the rules. And then, I mean, the game can be quite messy as a result, right? So, I mean, I've had a number of conversations, for example, with Jason, and originally I didn't agree with some things he said, but now, much later, I do understand why he's saying that, and I've actually find myself moving more and more towards the way in which they write the games, because it makes more sense to have balanced choices. If you have a choice which is obviously wrong, then what's the point of even having it? You have to have.
Well, that's particularly for you, is there's really no wrong answer because, there's the bad choice, if you will. But if you're playing a villain, then the bad choice is the right choice. You know what I mean? So you can, all the choices available to you are really actually engageable, just depending on whether you're doing a playthrough as a hero or a playthrough as a villain.
Yes, I mean, this is what originally the game that I wrote, and it was a superhero game. Just somebody told me they wanted to play the villain, and I thought, right. And this was very early in the development of the game with some of the playtesters, and I thought, well, okay, really, but then how is this going to work? And then I spent a week thinking about it, and I thought, well, actually, it's not that difficult to make it into a villain story either. It just depends on what the approach is. And so, but yeah, at a certain point, of course, the story branches more and more when you're a villain because it's a slightly different way. But yeah, actually, there is a freedom to create stories that are ambivalent. And I do think that at least in this case, the story of the villain makes sense, and the story of the superhero makes sense. I mean, they do at one point start to do different things, right?
Yeah.
So there is a branching, but yeah.
Well, and you also have the vigilante. You have kind of like the middle road too, where you kind of just do whatever you could be good or be bad, change your mind, and moment to moment too. So.
Yeah, and again, this was one of the playtesters that told me, well, actually, I don't want to behave like that. So I thought, right, so ultimately, you can do it. Actually, you can also change. I think at a certain point in the game, you can actually also change from being a superhero to a vigilante, and even from a vigilante to a bad guy. Yeah? So again, people wanted to do that because people said, like, actually, at this point in the game, I don't feel like this is not what I want to do. And it's like, well, if you don't feel like that, why should I force you to play the game the way I see it? It's a game, right? It's to be played in the way that you think it should be played, or that you want to enjoy it. So yeah, I try to give as much freedom as I can, although that creates a lot of headaches, believe me.
So just by the nature of it, again, the hosted games and choice script games are primarily text adventure games, so they are very accessible just by out of the box the way they come, with the voiceover and screen reader. But was there anything that you had to do to add accessibility to your game, or did it again just kind of right out of the package for choice script? It really was all just accessible, and you didn't have to do anything special to make it accessible.
It's all like that. Again, this is down to the philosophy, I believe, of choice of games. So they have a quite what's the word I'm looking for? A proactive attitude to engaging with different groups of people. So the games tend to be quite, as you say, accessible. I think they've engaged with maybe the blind community for a long time. I'm not exactly sure. For this, you probably need to talk to Jason, who's one of the guys there, and he will probably tell you the story of all of it. Whereas I just got this, and I am aware that some people who read the games are blind. Some people have written me, and then okay, yeah, I've made amendments sometimes to the stories according to what they said, but I am not too sure how exactly at which point the engagement took place with choice of games. I mean, I'm not fully aware of how that story went.
Tell me a little bit more about any interaction you've had with the blind community about your games. What were they asking you to do, or were they looking for representation? What was that kind of communication about?
It was more about the stories themselves, like some extra choices that were needed, or some feedback. I don't fully remember exactly what it was specifically. Typically, every email that I receive, I put on a folder, and then at some point, I action everything that people ask me. So, I mean, I do know that at this point, I have about 30, 40 emails of feedback accumulated for the last year because as I'm trying to push my story forward, I haven't done much of the feedback for the last year or so.
Right.
I've been a bit slow, but eventually, every email that I get, I action from whoever it is. I try to at least incorporate something of what they're telling me. I mean, sometimes people are asking me a lot, so it's like, actually, well, I can't do what you're saying to do. It would take me like would be an entire new branch of the story, and then I'm time is limited. But normally I try to at least do something from everybody, because I believe that every feedback that I get is a valid point of view. Well, I mean, okay, as long as people don't tell me anything like completely crazy, like I don't
Right.
know, I want to do genocide or something like that. So I do, but I mean, normally I think there should be
with these various storylines that you've created, was there a particular storyline that you really enjoyed writing, or really excite you, of whether it be a particular main quest storyline, or even a side quest storyline?
I don't know. Is there anything that I enjoyed more? Well, since my wife has just arrived and I'm here in the background, actually one of the characters is called, her nickname is Headshot, because that's her nickname
Okay.
when she was playing shooting games in high school. So
Nice.
apparently she was known in her school because she was, I don't know, it was one of these 3D shooting games.
She's
And
got
she
some
was apparently
skills, it sounds like.
apparently she was lethal. So people, whenever we meet high school friends, people still remember about this and go like, "Oh yeah, you used to kill me every time, headshot, killed by headshot or something like." So yeah, that was why that nickname of that character was created. So
What
yeah, so
about
I don't know.
I don't want to give too much away, but the first story, there's kind of uh, a side quest that you know I don't know how to describe it, but it kind of goes into the monster fantastical or monster fantasy, if you will, if you know what I'm talking about without giving it away. How did that come up? Was that like a suggestion from a reader, or did that come up from you? Because it's kind of a little bit different than the rest of the story.
Docklands, when you go into the Docklands? No.
Um, I don't remember exactly what the setting. You're in a foreign country and you meet
Ah,
meet a group of people who kind of change you, if you will. I don't want to give it away. Uh, do you know what I'm talking about?
in the foreign country. Yes. Sorry. Now I get you. Yeah, this is one of my study sites. This is a place I go to a lot, right? So the
Hmm.
setting, actually, why it's set in that country is because I go there a lot. So
Okay.
actually, I was writing that story while on field work. So actually, a lot of the descriptions are just me sitting wherever it is that I'm describing and just writing what I'm seeing. And
Right.
of course, the elements of the story of what happens, that is based on um it's based on a choose your own adventure book that I read as a kid.
Hmm.
So, and then I incorporated that, some of the ideas in that. So I think I found this book accidentally when I was at home before I left on my field work, and then this story was playing in my head. So then I was like, well, I'm just gonna mix where I am with this choose your adventure story. And then that's how that happened. That's why that is that way.
Hmm.
So literally, when you're in the plane, actually, I was just in the plane writing this sequence in the plane, and then I was in a hotel, and I was writing that sequence in the hotel. And the items that you can buy at that point is just because I was there and just went to a stall and went, all right, I could buy that. So yeah, it was
Yeah,
kind of like a
there's literally journaling almost, your experience.
yeah. So actually, in Genesis, there are several parts of the story. We actually travel to different countries, and exactly, I was in those countries, and what I was doing in the evening is just writing the story. So that's why sometimes it might be a bit odd what's happening, but it's just me doing that, and then just imagining that something. Well, as I was walking around some streets, thinking, "Oh, what did this happen now?"
Right.
And then I just wrote about it in the evening.
So, you've written two games at this point. You're obviously spending a lot of time by updating it and adding new things. Um, so you're obviously getting some, feeling some success from it. But how do you measure that success? Is it just personal gratification of I'm just enjoying doing this, or is it, hey, lots of people seem to be downloading and liking it, so that's fueling me to keep going? Like, what fuels you to continue? Is it just for your own self gratification, or is it that you're getting feedback and a lot of people are downloading and liking it, and so that keeps you going?
Yeah, okay, this is a hobby for me. It really is something that I enjoy doing. I do it in my spare time. It's not like my main job at any point. I mean, this franchise has now 2 games. I've got another 3, I think. So
Another
which
3, so 5 total.
5 total, and then 2 more that are that are that's been co-written with other people. So 5 of my own, and then 2 more with other people. I just enjoy writing them, and it's a bit strange sometimes. For example, my last game was not on this franchise; it was a different game, and I knew before writing it that it wasn't going to do well. So
Okay.
I knew I was going against what many people want.
Why did you know that?
So there is a logic of what people like, in the same way that there is a logic of what the films that people like, right? So if you write, a lot of people enjoy these stories because they want to interact with the world. They want to have something which has a sense of a storyline, right?
Mhm.
A lot of people like them for the romance options. So many people, if there are no romance options in the story, many people will switch off automatically. They won't even want to read them. And I understand why, because I'm not disagreeing at all with why people like the games, because myself, I also think that some of this, when I enjoy the stories, is often because they follow a certain, not rules, but they have certain elements. The same way that when you enjoy a movie, I don't know, if the movie is all over the place and the story is like disjointed, then maybe you don't enjoy it so much. Anyway, but this is the game that I wanted to write, and it was more to do with the coding. I wanted to do something from a coding point of view. So I wanted to do to create a system, like a dungeon system, that would be semi-random and allow people to replay it many times. But this was more for myself. So it's, how can I put it? Often I write the game that I want to write, and in that case, I already knew before it came out that that many people were not going to like it, but some people do. It attracts a certain number of people who like that kind of game. So of course, it's difficult because when I first wrote, for example, Hero Villain Genesis, that was the story that I wanted to write at the time. That system is what interested me. As I'm going along with the story, that I'm finding that sometimes my mind is wanting to start a new game because I want to create a new game system. And this is a struggle that many writers seem to have in hosted games and choice of games. When I talk to the different authors, they seem to suffer from the same thing. They want to start a new story because they want to introduce a new dynamic, but sometimes they know that that might not work actually, but still that's what's in their mind.
For someone who is, maybe thinking about, well, maybe I'll start writing a story, on ChoiceScript. What would be your kind of advice for them, to have them, start off and, be as successful as possible, from the outset?
Okay, so I've written about this a few articles on the forum, but I always say the same things to people. If you're going to write a ChoiceScript story, first thing, write a 30,000 word, completely railroaded, no choices. Just write it in a Word document, no choices, nothing. Just 20,000 words in second person from beginning to end. No choice as it was. Once you finish doing that, and you've got your 20,000 words, because any story has to be at least 20,000 words to be viable.
Sure.
People don't like shorter stories.
Right.
In this medium, right? Once you got your 20, preferably 30,000 words, go through it and just put fake choices everywhere. And these fake choices can be just related to how people feel. So you met this person, fake choice. So asterisk, fake, underline, choice. I liked him. I hated him. He was okay. And then you have a complete story finished. And some games in ChoiceScript and hosted games are practically like that. They are just railroaded from beginning to end. Once you finish that, then ask playtesters, what is it that you want to do? at what point did you want to do something different? And then you start branching out. So this is my advice for people. And the key point why I always say this is because many people will not finish their stories otherwise. They will get halfway, they will start to branch too much. And at one point, the branching overtakes your brain and it freezes you. You understand that to move forward, you have to write each of the branches, but then you realize that you've gotten yourself into climbing a mountain without any, and you just won't finish it. There's so many people that don't finish because of that. So I try always to write, before I release any game, I try to have a big chunk of the story written before I start showing it to people. And I try to always go at least have one railroaded line to a finish point before I branch out. If this makes sense.
Sure. Yeah. So I had, before I lost my sight, I been fooling around with Twine and writing a game, which is a little bit more coding. It sounds like the choice script. But what I found as I got deeper into the game, kind of testing the new, mechanic or the new, where I'm supposed to be, and it just got hard to constantly play through the game to get to that spot to make sure that it wasn't going to bomb out, because I didn't actually have the choice. So like, how is it really just getting a bunch of people to play your game and then give you feedback, or is there a better way to, QC or QA your, what you've written and where you are?
So if you write a story that is railroaded, yes,
yeah,
then there is default path in the game that can be followed from beginning to end that is doable and feasible, right? So then it is possible for somebody to follow that story. And then at the end of the story, you have some variables and you can tell the person, well, okay, so you punch the villain, you have strength over 40, over 80, fine, you knock him out, you win, otherwise you lose. And that is one viable game, right? If you introduce a lot of complex mechanics throughout the game, and the mechanics are pushing you in different directions, then of course you have to play test everything. This happens to me, for example, I have a lot of fights in these games, and each fight is a condensed sequence, but all the fights will finish in either state, either the character winning or losing, right?
Yeah.
If the character wins, the story continues. If the character loses, there is a consequence for that loss, but you fail forward. You let the person continue. You end up in hospital and you wake up and maybe you diminish some of but the story continues. And it's important to make the game in a way that it always rolls forward, right? And all these threads must rejoin a sort of like a certain point. Does that make sense? What I'm trying to explain?
Yeah. Yep.
And then you have to have a lot of playtesters. And the playtesters really will
start. How many playtesters did you have?
Different games, different people. The Genesis had a lot. I think they're all in the credits. I don't know, there must have been 40, 50, 60 people.
And
Battle Royale.
Where do you find all those people? Is that just like posting out to the interactive fiction forum and just saying I need playtesters, or like how do you?
Yeah, Choice of Games forum. Yeah. So you post a story, but you need to have like a good demo, and then people will read it, and then they will give you feedback.
Gotcha.
And they really give you an amazing. I mean, I cannot stress how good they are, how good they are at actually also telling you, like, actually, here that doesn't make sense, or this character I don't like that character. What's the? And a lot of the times it's like I respond to criticism in the sense of like, well, okay, fine. So I'll work more on that character. I get what you're saying. Like, it's not he doesn't make sense or she doesn't make sense. Like there has to be a background story to that, and they force you to think. So they're amazing.
Now, I know these games take quite a while to write and get out there. You said you are just have finished 2 of the 5. When can people expect 3? Is that coming out in months or years or or
Well,
unsure?
no, I mean, I said I've released 5 games, so but only 2 on
Yeah, and the hero or villain franchise.
hero villain. Yeah, the problem is this is a hobby. So whenever my main job is busy, whenever I'm busy with my main job, then I don't progress at all.
Right.
So at the moment I've had I sometimes have weeks when I write several thousand, 10,000 words, 15,000 words. Other weeks I get nothing done. This week, 0, nothing.
Right.
So it is a problem. The thing is, this is not something that you do for, or at least I don't think many of the authors that do this do make a living out of this. Yes, of course, we make some money out of it, but it's not, how can I say, it doesn't pay. If I had to, I wouldn't be able to live from this at all.
Right.
So you do it for the pleasure. But this means also that then if you have a week where you're feeling a bit tired, then you just don't do it because, I do try to get the games slowly moving along. But as the games get bigger, I mean, I like to say that every 1,000 words of the game is typically 4 or 5 hours of time. It takes about an hour to write it, an hour to code it, an hour to then polish it and debug it, an hour talking in total of talking to the reviewers and people in the forums, and another hour just for the whole polishing at the end.
Right.
So a 200,000 word game is in the order of 300 times 5, 1,000 hours.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a lot.
It's a lot. And as the games get bigger, then this increases. I mean, some people seem to be able to write quicker. It depends also how streamlined your games are, because my games have a lot of fights and coding and complicated. Then this becomes a lot more. I spend a lot more time with the coding. I enjoy that. I think some people then write more linear, like there's more space between choices.
Right.
Maybe this is easier then because they're writing a lot of description and then all they're doing is polishing it. I don't know. For me, I normally reckon it's about 4 or 5 hours per 1,000 words.
Yeah, I think, well, there's some people who write, and then there's really just like it's not a choice. It's like almost like just a continue button to the next thing.
Yeah.
I think at the end of each of your paragraphs there is a choice. So
yeah, I like to do maximum every 200 words. I like to put a choice, and often it's about every 100 words. So yeah, normally it's about every page there is a choice.
Right.
So then that makes my games a bit more coding intensive. But I mean, that's what I like. I guess I'm an engineer by training, so I like all this code and.
Yeah, I like that part too. Like that's what I liked in Twine, because it was it's the puzzle of it. The coding is the puzzle of creating the game, which I thought was fun to kind of pull together. Well, Miguel, thank you so much for spending time with me, telling me all about how you created the hero or villain series, and getting into the technical aspect. I mean, we don't often talk about that with developers of like what is the actual code that you have to write. And so I think that gives people some insight, and maybe makes it not seem as scary that if they think they have a good idea, maybe they will decide to pick it up and give it a chance on writing it on this particular platform. So I really appreciate you taking the time to kind of explain it to us. Again, there's 2 games out there right now. There's Hero or Villain Genesis, Hero or Villain Battle Royale. Both very interesting games and very different from each other in some ways. You kind of have the first game, Genesis, where you're building up your character, and then in Battle Royale, it's really kind of taking what you've built up and putting it out there in the world to some degree. So kind of different experiences, those 2 games from each other. And it sounds like the third game is going to be even different than those 2. So I like that each time you're kind of in a very different scene or different scenario that you're taking this character from.
Thank you. I'm glad you like them, and I hope people will start to write their own games. Like, please, I'm not sure how easy, but maybe you also want to give it a go. I'm not sure how.
Yeah, how accessible it is. I think people have told me that writing in ChoiceScript is accessible for the blind. And as you said, you can write a lot of it just in Word, and then copy and paste it in there, or maybe get assistants to copy and paste it in there. So, it seems like it could be doable. But again, thank you so much. Please, when you're ready to release, the next chapter, please come back. We'd love to hear about it and talk to you some more, and promote it out to the community, because they're great, fun games. Again, you want to be the hero or the villain or the vigilante. This is a great game to kind of decide what, make your own choices and be who you want to be. And again, you really do feel like you are creating your own character and making those own choices. So really unique, and a lot of paths that open up only if you're the hero, paths that open up only if you're the villain. So a lot of replayability. I think I've have 4 or 5 different playthroughs of different ways that I tried to approach the storyline. So lots of replayability available in the game series.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.